Pitch is out. He can't hold altitude. He's breaking up. He's breaking up. Hi, this is Scott Ott with Bill Whittle, and this is Bill Whittle Now. And Bill, that's the phrase of which I was reminded when I went to a website that I go. It's a news aggregation website called Memorandum, and it kind of aggregates the top stories of the day. And I'm just skimming down it, and I do this all the time. So this was a little peculiar in the kind of the volume of headlines that all seem to have a consistent theme. And let me just read a couple of them to you. This one came from the Washington Post. Trust in Trump's word plummets as harsh realities sink in. CNN headline said signs that Trump's base is leaving him on the coronavirus. Politico had Trump stares down tanking economy. Ticking economy time bomb. I can't read my own handwriting. The Washington Post again, Trump faces rising disapproval and widespread distrust. The Cook political report says that 20 House races are now trending toward the Democrats. Wall Street Journal, signs of political realignment in the South. And finally, New Yorker had a headline that said, Trump's losing, so when are Republican candidates going to abandon him? Now, Bill, I suspect you will say, well, what do you expect from the mainstream media? And this is the kind of reporting that we had leading up to the 2016 Trump victory. But if that is the case, to anticipate what I believe would be your objection, how is it possible that all of these media people who so desperately want Trump to lose are playing the same song that they did leading up to 2016?
Well, what do you expect from the mainstream media? This is the kind of reporting that we saw leading up to them predicting Trump losing in 2016. I have to say, there is, I think, a shadow of some truth to this. I've spoken to some people who have been pretty disappointed with the president's response for the last 4 to 6 weeks in terms of the coronavirus and the economy, feel that he's basically not being seen enough. And I think that's probably a legitimate concern.
Since he stopped doing the daily coronavirus briefings.
Yes. And again, this whole COVID-19 thing, I just refuse to play Monday morning quarterback on this, but it looks like he took the advice of a number of scientists and computer models that didn't prove to be as accurate as they'd hoped, and you can really not really blame the guy for that. It's a fairly arcane field, virology and epidemiology, but nevertheless, I think I've heard a few Trump supporters say they'd like to see more leadership from the president in terms of putting this pandemic in perspective, not dismissing it or just laughing at it, but putting in some perspective and taking more command of getting the country reopened as a country. That said, what their polls and their numbers and their indicate, we all know what their intent is.
Meaning the media.
But yes. It's to there's an expression called F.U.D, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. You want to spread fear, uncertainty, and doubt among your competitors in any way possible. In a sense of a business, if you have a competitor or maybe a business you wanted to buy, you would spread rumors that the CEO is an alcoholic and is about to be removed, and the stocks are way overvalued, and it's just a tactic. And there's no question that there's a lot of FUD stirring going on there. But I think what I pay more attention to than polls, especially polls from places like big news agencies that are dinosaurs on the way out, just don't know the meteor is hit yet. I pay more attention to statistics like gun sales and to evidence like people suing to get out of Manhattan. These things to me
by people,
carry
you
a
mean
great deal more
businesses
weight.
that are trying to break their leases to get away from the city.
Not just businesses. Certainly Seattle's a deep blue, and so is San Francisco, and makes Los Angeles look practically purple in comparison. But I don't think you get any deeper blue than the liberal elite in New York City itself, in Manhattan. And we've done a number of shows about them leaving the city for the country, perhaps permanently. And I pay much more attention to these sort of things. I think we are rapidly entering the point where Donald Trump will no longer be running unopposed. And I think if Donald Trump ran unopposed, he'd lose. But he's not. And all of these comparisons and all of these whatever failures that may have merit in these stories, and I think there's some merit to it, will now start to face the reality of, okay, now it's not just, do you like Donald Trump or not? It's, do you like Donald Trump better than Joe Biden? And especially, and this is the part that I think is especially damning for them, because I have a strong sense that Biden is not going to be the candidate in November. I personally think that the plan is to get him through the convention, drag him across the line. Once he has the nomination, once he's officially nominated by the Democratic Party, if I understand the rules correctly, the Democratic Party, if they can force him out of the race with suddenly paying attention to Tara Reade and all the rest of this stuff, then they simply name their candidate. But in any event, whether Biden is able to be standing there in the debates in October or not, the Democratic Party has committed to a number of things that I just think are unelectable. Open borders, green economy in 10 years, elimination of air travel, essentially elimination of hamburgers and all the rest of the stuff. I just think that as long as it's Donald Trump by himself, it's easy to lampoon him and say people are support is falling or whatever. But that's not who he's running against in November.
So this will all collapse. You reminded me of a friend in college who, when things were going tough for me, the most encouraging thing he ever said, in fact, the only encouraging thing he ever said to me was, "It could be worse." So you're basically saying that people look at Donald Trump now and say, wow, this is awful. And then once Joe Biden finally gets the nomination and is out on whatever the campaign trail looks like in 2020, the people will look at Trump and go, yeah, he's awful, but it could be worse.
I don't want to say that. I don't.
No, you wouldn't say that, but a lot of people who are on the bubble, or moderate Republicans, independents, and of course conservative Democrats.
That's the only qualification that I wanted to put in there. I certainly did not want to give the impression that Trump supporters are somehow on the bubble or thinking maybe they won't vote for him anymore. We're talking about people that are kind of in the middle and tend to blow with whatever way the wind is blowing. But to say that Trump's support among his core supporters is diminishing, I think, is just plain madness.
So even with the response, as you acknowledge that there had been some grumblings kind of behind the scenes among conservatives about the fact, and frankly, this stuns me that you say this, because I think a lot of people were saying, well, gee, do we really need to see the president every single day talking for an hour about a disease? But it seems like you're suggesting that he needs to get back out there and ramble for an hour about a disease if he hopes to recapture the momentum.
That is not at all what I'm saying. The fact that the president stopped doing daily coronavirus updates right around the same time that I stopped doing them was right around the time that it became clear that there was no new information about this disease, and this entire 2 weeks to flatten the curve thing was either a lie or a falsehood that was rapidly proven to be a falsehood, and then the politics took over. I'm not talking about him doing a daily press conference on the coronavirus. I'm talking about him getting out in front of this thing and saying, it is time to open this country now, and we are going to do it, and we understand there's going to be losses, and we're going to do what we can to protect the most vulnerable, but it's time to get back to work and damn the torpedoes. And I think
all the headlines are saying, hey, we are getting back to work. And in every place you can see us getting back to work, my own Texas, for example, cases of coronavirus are surging consistently day after day and week after week. And we're getting higher death tolls than in the previous weeks leading up to this. So it sounds like you're going exactly against what the mainstream narrative is, which is, hey, see what happens when you open up too quickly?
Well, first of all, the gigantic spike in infections that we saw was followed about 2 weeks. It followed about precisely the coronavirus incubation period after the George Floyd protests. So to say that if the deaths were,
are you suggesting correlation or causation?
I'm suggesting causation without question, because if it turned out that it was just the states that were going back to work, we'd see a spike in places like Texas and not one in places like California or elsewhere. But that's not what we're seeing. And this is the thing that I think the president needs to get in front of. he's so easily demonized and so on. But basically, I think a position of most Americans, certainly the position of conservatives that I know, is that essentially it goes something like this. The Chinese Communist Party, through malfeasance or whatever, or just through bad luck, had a virus of previously unknown origin developed in their country. They lied about it. They concealed it. They allowed people to travel knowing it was contagious, and so on and so on and so on. And that introduced a new death factor into the world. And that death factor is not terribly significant, but it is not trivial either. It might be the third or fourth biggest killer in 2020 for Americans. But somewhere in here, I think what most Americans are yearning to hear, certainly, is that this is life. We don't get to rewrite this script. This is not a fantasy, and this is not an ideal world. This is the reality of what the CCP has done, and we have to live by that reality. And that means that we are going to have to understand that we are going to take some casualties as a result of this action and inaction and culpability on the part of the Chinese. And we're going to do everything we can to minimize damage to our citizens, as we already have by this shutdown. But I think there comes a point when you have to say, we are well past the point now, I think, well past the point where the cure is worse than the disease. And to give you just a small example, a quick example of what the president could be doing, they just recently did an interview with 5 pediatricians asking if they would send their kids to school now in the fall, given COVID-19. And you could see the reaction on the news anchor's face, because he was sure that with the pediatrician, my God, that's a doctor, it's practically a scientist, that they would all say, oh God, no, I would never expose my kid to this. Every one of the 5 said, absolutely, I'd send him back. Absolutely. The news anchor is just shocked. That's the voice that we need to hear right now. And that's the voice that the president should be striving for. And certainly that is the voice that he delivered his message in on the 4th of July. And he is certainly capable of doing that. And I don't want to hear about him reading a teleprompter. Every single president in history, at least I know for one exception of Abraham Lincoln, but most of them anyway, most modern presidents certainly, have speechwriters. And it's not a question of the speechwriter does not come in and say, here's what I'd like to talk about, here's what I think is good for the country, and hand it to the president. A speechwriter works with the president, finds out what the president wants to do and communicates, and then he is a professional who crafts words, puts them down, and the president delivers them, and that's how it works. And we need more of that silver, what I call the silver trumpet. That silver trumpet is the sound of courage and truth and leadership. And it's the sound we heard from George Bush Jr. On the rubble pile in 9/11. And we need that music right now. And I think, given the success of the president's 4th of July speech among the people who still love the country, which is why the press hated it so much, I think we should be getting a lot more of that. I think he needs to get in front of this, what is clearly now a political issue. Scott, the whole game changed in terms of evidence. I knew there was something wrong by the middle of April, but in terms of evidence, factual things that happened, the scope of the pandemic was made clear to me when all of the Democrats basically said, get out there and protest this George Floyd thing, because they understood how serious this pandemic is and isn't, especially among young people. And for them to basically say, we're in the middle of a deadly pandemic, go out and protest this one left-wing thing, but for God's sakes, come back immediately and put on a mask afterwards. That's all I need to know about what they actually believe about the mortality of this disease. And this is a serious point. The president should be on this too. There's a difference between contagion and mortality. If everybody has a disease and 40% or 50% of the people don't even know they have it, and the other 40 or 50% have minor symptoms, what's concerning us is not the I think the term is morbidity, the amount of people that are infected. What's really affecting us now is how many people are dying from this. And it turns out it's about a 0.4%. And almost all of those people are elderly. And I'm not saying, and I have never been saying too bad for them, but we now have to make a decision to put a protective cordon around the most vulnerable and get the rest of the country back to work. And I think we need to hear a speech from the president on that, and shortly. But in terms of his, this is whistling past the graveyard as far as they're concerned, I think.
Ladies and gentlemen, the members at BillWhittle.com have made this program possible in addition to some 40 shows a month that we produce at BillWhittle.com. The members also produce their own content, a vigorous conversation going on in the discussion threads underneath each of these videos, as well as their own member-written blog, which it continues to grow by the week and has frankly become some of the best reading that you'll find on the internet. If you're not yet a member at BillWhittle.com, that's easy enough to do. Go to BillWhittle.com and click that big green Become a Member button. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.